Hey Jasper,
Hmm.
you want to make a game about apples?
You want to make a game about apples? It's literally.
So we decided to make a game about apples, but we didn't quite finish. I'm going to tell you what was interesting, what went wrong, and a few things we learned along the way here. Okay, in case you haven't been following along, I'm Sam, one of the 3 members of Weird Mage. We're a creative studio that loves making games and telling stories that entertain people. We launched earlier this summer and have taken the past couple months to make projects that help us learn new tools and hone our crafts as creators. If you want to learn more about those projects, you can watch the previous videos on this channel. So, me and Jasper are programmers, and before this summer we had a lot of experience in Unity, one of the biggest commercial game engines. In July, we released a game made using Godot, the major free and open source game engine, and we found that we really liked it. But that meant that there was only one game engine out there that we still really wanted to try: Unreal. Unreal is a hugely popular engine made by Epic Games, so it's used to make some of the biggest games out there, like Fortnite and Rocket League. But you can do a lot more with it than just make Thanos hit the gritty. It has similar licensing terms to Unity, so indie devs use it to make games like Astroneer and Foxhole. So, here was our plan. Take 2 weeks in August to make a game in Unreal.
Before I tell you why we didn't finish it, can I pitch you the game? Because I really like it. So I was listening to Louis Zong's album Boss Rush on YouTube, and besides just being an absolute banger, the aesthetic really grabbed me. Each track is themed around a different boss from the same fake video game. I really focused in on the protagonist though, this little apple boy. And I started to think, what if this was a real game? And so did everyone else in the comments. But the little apple boy stuck with me, and I started to draw all kinds of produce guys. I had this idea of the apple boy doing battle against armed fruits and vegetables, pickles and pears, all cartoony and with their own weapons. And I just kept drawing more and more of these dudes. As I did, I thought more and more about what the game that they live in would be like. And then I got it. A combination of 2 games I really like: Mario 64 and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It seemed natural to me that the little apple would be quick and nimble like the player is in Mario 64. He belonged in a world that he could explore by zipping around and kicking off walls. I also thought that the apple boy and his opponents would have that impactful, deadly combat that I loved out of Fallen Order. A couple wrong moves and you're done. So that's a pretty fun pitch, right? Seems like a pretty cool game, right? Seems like it wouldn't be that hard to make, right? The first thing I did was dump all of my thoughts into a game design document. Me and Jasper would be working apart for the first week of the project, and I really wanted to make sure we were on the same page. So I wrote down everything that was in my head, what the art and the sound should look like, mechanics, and game feel. Once we had the game planned out, it was time to finally touch Unreal though. And that's where things started to get hairy. First, I had to spend a day just figuring out why the Epic Game Store couldn't install, which you need for the Unreal Engine for some reason. But eventually, I had the Unreal Engine installed and I started it up. And once I had Unreal up, I realized I didn't know where to start. So I went online for a YouTube tutorial. There are a lot of tutorials out there, and most of them didn't feel like they were geared towards me. A lot were more for animation, and the ones that were about game dev didn't answer the questions I had as someone who already had experience with other engines. But then maybe that's not YouTube's fault. Unreal's use cases cover basically all applications of computer graphics. Between game dev, animation, architecture, car modeling, film effects, there's an infinite amount of stuff you will never touch. Diving into the docs was also overwhelming. Like, I get that an object can be anything, And fine, sure, an actor is an object that can exist in a level. But I'll be damned if I didn't read over the differences between a pawn, which is an actor that can be controlled by a player or an AI, and a character, which is a pawn that's intended to be used by a player, like I was studying for the LSAT. And it's not just the docs that are overwhelming. Like this is a blank level. You notice how it's not particularly blank? And if you wanted it to be blank, you might go about deleting the terrain tiles. But oh no, did you forget about the holds? The holds, hierarchical level of details. Those things that are attached to the terrain tiles that you didn't want to begin with. And they need to be rebuilt if you're going to delete them. And if for some reason you don't know what a hold is, you're going to have to go on the docs just to read up on them and still not understand what they are or why you need them to begin with. But don't worry, in 2 days you'll realize that you could just press this button. Press this button to make it actually blank level like you wanted the whole time and you didn't even need to know about holds. Jasper was in a similar boat. He had been learning Blender to model our Apple character, but when it came to animating it in Unreal, there was just a lot of options. He didn't know what would work best with what I'd already done and the scope of the project. He was trying to catch up on what I'd already learned in the same amount of time. That's all just to say that there were a lot of little things that amounted to a big learning curve. That, coupled with the effects of having to move apartments, meant that development was going a lot slower than we had hoped. Still, we did make some progress. I found this video by Code Tech and Tutorials about how to use C++ for Unreal really helpful as someone with previous experience programming for game engines. He covered things about the basic workflows that other more hand-holdy tutorials just didn't. That, coupled with other tutorials, the docs, and good old-fashioned trial and error, we really started to make some inroads on our game about Apple combat. We started programming in C++ and a little in Blueprints. We were adapting Unreal's basic character controller for our needs, but it took a little while to figure out how the movement was supposed to interface with Unreal's physics, and where the important components of the basic character were even at. But after a while, we had a little cube that moved. Mostly normally. Progress was still slow, though. Our deadline was only a few days away, and all we had to show was... So it didn't look great. We kept going for a little while, enough to make a test level and some mid 3D platforming, but we had to face it. We weren't going to achieve our original vision. If we kept going, we probably would have made something playable, where you could run around and maybe fight an enemy. But whatever we made, it wasn't going to be fun. So after some long talks, we decided to scrap the project. That was a hard decision to make. It felt like failing, and on some level it was. We didn't make the game we set out to make. But the reason we decided to scrap the project was because we succeeded in our original goal. We set out and we wanted to find if Unreal was a good fit for us. And the answer? Probably not. Unreal has some cool features, but none that are make or break for us. And spending the months that it would take to learn, especially when we already know Unity and Godot pretty well, just don't seem justified. That's not to say that Unreal is a bad option. If you're an aspiring game developer and you don't have any experience and you're trying to figure out what engine to use, there's a lot to like about Unreal. Unreal has tools for advanced lighting, highly detailed real-time rendering, easy foliage generation, lifelike human rigging and animating. If you go to their features section on their page, you'll probably find something that's interesting to you. Or if you wanted to work at a larger studio one day, more and more of them are switching over to Unreal, so that knowledge might be more directly applicable than something like Unity. None of that really describes us though, so for now, we're going to say goodbye to Chris and move on to our next project. This time, something much bigger than a 2-week sprint. If you want to know more about that project, then subscribe so you know the moment that the video about it comes out. See you then. Bye! Is that in frame? I don't know. Got a big ol' arm. So that's in frame.